So today, we're going to break down a very specific type of high achiever. We're not just talking about someone who finds success. We're talking about someone who builds their entire world with absolute, deliberate intention, brick by brick. This is the architect's blueprint.
And at the absolute core of this blueprint, there's this single, incredibly powerful belief that pretty much functions as their operating system. It's the idea that sheer willpower can actually bend reality. And that right there, that's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover.
All right, so to really get this blueprint, we first have to understand the architect themselves. So let's start by defining this archetype, the modern field marshal.
You know, in personality theory, they're often called the field marshal, or ENTJ. That stands for extroverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. And that combination is really the key here. They're charismatic, they're rational, and they have this unshakable confidence. They don't just see a problem, they see a system that needs to be organized and a goal that absolutely needs to be crushed.
Okay, so now let's pop the hood a little bit and look at the mindset that's driving the field marshal. You can really think of it as a psychological operating system, and it's one that's fundamentally designed for leadership and, well, for dominance.
Probably the easiest way to wrap your head around this is that classic metaphor of the lion versus the sheep. It's pretty simple, right? One creates its own path, totally driven by this hunger for success. The other follows the herd, looking for safety by just blending in. The field marshal's operating system is, without a doubt, the lion's.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures that entire value system. It's all about choosing one single day of impactful, self-directed living over 1,000 years of just existing safely. It's about making a mark, not just getting by.
So how does this mindset actually translate into action? I mean, the goal to get better is kind of vague, right? Well, in this framework, it gets distilled into 3 really concrete pursuits: becoming stronger, richer, and more attractive. These are treated as inherent goods, things that are just always desirable, period.
And from this perspective, if you argue against these things, you're not taking some kind of moral high ground. No, you're actually arguing for entropy, that natural slide towards decline and chaos. The logic is brutally simple. If you aren't actively getting stronger, richer, and more attractive, then by default, you are becoming weaker, poor, and ugly. So, with that mindset firmly in place, let's turn to the practical stuff. How does the architect actually shape their world? They do it with their primary weapon, the arts of negotiation.
And it really starts with a principle that's so simple yet so powerful. If you don't ask, you don't get. It's kind of amazing how many things in life are actually flexible. Just by asking for a better deal, you can often get a 5 to 10% discount. And this goes way beyond shopping. It's about seeing almost every interaction as a potential negotiation.
But look, effective negotiation isn't about just winging it. It rests on 3 solid pillars of preparation. First, you have to have absolute clarity on what you want. Second, you have to know your walkaway point, your bottom line. And third, you gotta know your BATNA. That's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In other words, what's your plan B?
And the advantage this preparation gives you is, well, it's immense. I mean, just look at the chart. The prepared negotiator has a massively higher chance of winning. It's like 2 generals planning a battle. The one who runs the more accurate simulation beforehand almost always wins. The person who did the homework controls the conversation.
But true mastery, that goes beyond just simple tactics. It involves what former FBI negotiators call tactical empathy. Now, this isn't about being nice or friendly. It's about deeply understanding the other side's perspective so you can build trust, dial up the positive feelings, and ultimately influence where things go.
So how does this all come together? Let's take a look at how that lion's mindset and these tools of influence combine to execute strategies that, and I'm not exaggerating, literally architect reality.
This brings us to the core thesis of the entire blueprint, the big idea. It's this: your reality is not a fixed state. It's a starting point. It is the opening offer in a lifelong negotiation you're having with the world.
And if you want a masterclass in this, just look at Alexander the Great's speech at office when his entire army mutinied. It's a perfect 4-step strategic playbook. First, he reminded them of their shared value from the past. Then, he recounted his present sacrifices. Next, he completely reframed their future by turning their mutiny against them. And finally, the endgame. He reclaimed control with the ultimate power move, just dismissing them completely. He literally negotiated his authority back from the brink of collapse.
All right, finally, let's explore the last layer of this whole archetype, how this power is expressed. Because it's often not through brute force or being the loudest person in the room. It's through a meticulously curated life, what you might call the quiet power aesthetic.
You see this in the difference between quiet luxury and loud luxury. Think about a simple, perfectly made cashmere sweater versus a handbag that's just plastered in logos. It's about timelessness and quality, not just chasing trends. The whole philosophy is, if you know, you know. It's an approach that values real substance over just mass appeal.
And this aesthetic is really part of a bigger philosophy of living well. It teaches that true luxury isn't about how much stuff you can acquire, it's about having time. It's about creating your own unique style instead of just following fashion, and about finding real beauty in the small details of everyday life.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly sums up the entire aesthetic, doesn't it? It's all about prioritizing a personal, high-quality internal experience over a flashy, high-status external one. It's substance over signaling, every single time.
Which brings us to the final and most important point. We've explored this whole blueprint of the architect, from their mindset to their tools and their aesthetic. But the real question this leaves us with is a personal one. If it's really true that your reality is negotiable, then what deal are you willing to make for the life you want?